sex as something very special. You can use the word special, you can use the word sacred. I call it a holy gateway into the universe from which I came. In my particular home, it wasn't like sex was like absolutely wrong or bad or a taboo. It was just not talked about like ever. So it just wasn't mentioned. So we're just kind of like on our own figuring this out. And I don't know about you, but I certainly had a wild adventure, like exploring.
Amara Charles, a globally recognized relationship expert, author, and spiritual sexuality pioneer.
The more I learned, the more I realized that pleasure, that sensuality, it's not just about these big, fancy, woohoo, wow moments. It's also about allowing in the little sparks of aliveness, even in the middle of a busy day. Because let's face it, how are we going to enjoy pleasure if we're too tired to enjoy it?
So let's dive in. You've worked with thousands of people around the world. What are some of the most common ways high-achieving women become disconnected from their sensuality and intimacy? And what exactly is sensuality?
Great question. One of the ways that all women, and especially high-achieving women, we can disconnect from our own sensuality. Our sensuality is simply the enjoyment, the allowance, the letting in of being seen, being heard, and being touched. And I mean that both physically and touched in our heart. So the disconnection happens very often when we rush. We are very, very, very busy. And I've really taken the scenic route to exploring pleasure, because we have this weird relationship between pleasure and rest. And what I really want to talk about is how do we expand our capacity to allow pleasure? How do we expand what I call our pleasure edge? So I've taken the scenic route to exploring pleasure. And yeah, I'm the author of the Sexual Practices of Kodoshka, which is very fun and sometimes just as eyebrow raising. And I get to talk about things that people just Google at 2 a.m. But honestly, I started out being just as curious and just as confused as anyone about pleasure and about rest and allowing pleasure, and why we're all so weird about pleasure and rest. And the more I learned, the more I realized that pleasure, that sensuality, it's not just about these big, fancy, woohoo, wow moments. It's also about allowing in the little sparks of aliveness, even in the middle of a busy day. Okay, so now I really help people, and especially entrepreneurs, rediscover that pleasure edge. Because let's face it, if we're too tired, how are we going to enjoy pleasure if we're too tired to enjoy it?
No, that's absolutely right. And if you're rushing around, being busy, focusing on the future and not being in the present, we're human beings, not human doings. And if we're not stopping to take time to be present and to be in that moment, it's virtually impossible to really reconnect with pleasure and our sacred self.
I was actually going to lead a retreat in Costa Rica, right? And here I am, I'm planning what I'm going to do, and I'm in my internal busy mode, right? And so I tripped, and I felt I had latte all over. And it was literally, the universe literally tripped me into remembering, hey, girl, just slow down. You've got this, man. And so really the universe offers us these moments, because sometimes pleasure really lives in our pauses and not in the hustle.
Yeah, absolutely. So you speaking of which, you describe sexuality as this sacred expression of the self. And how does that shift the way that we view relationships and intimacy and love?
Really, our sexuality is all about the way we view it, isn't it? I mean, and most of us, many of us, even in today's culture, we were brought up, I know I was, in a culture and a family, in an environment where, well, in my particular home, it wasn't like sex was like absolutely wrong or bad or a taboo. It was just not talked about like ever, right? So it just wasn't mentioned. So we're just kind of like on our own figuring this out. And I don't know about you, but I certainly had a wild adventure, like exploring, having my first kiss in the front seat of a a Chevy because I call over, and we made out there, and the windows are all steamy and stuff, and that was like my first like, oh, my daring foray into the world of like, I'm going to try something that I want to do, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes what we think is what I call recreational. We're supposed to be having fun, recreational, having fun kind of sex exploration. Sometimes it doesn't turn out so fun, right? And so tuning in to answer your question and calling and believing and experiencing and feeling sex as something very special. You can use the word special, you can use the word sacred. I call it's a holy gateway into the universe from which I came. And so I make it out, I believe, and therefore I experience it this way, that, hey, we were all born through an act of sex. I mean, no matter how much our parents liked each other or talked about it, or, but the bottom line is that we were all born because an egg and a seed came together, and it was like whoosh, there was a moment of creation. Well, that moment of creation starts us all. All right. Now, in my book, I call that sacred. I call that magical. I call that wonderful. And if we can tune into that, what I call truth, that's just the way it is. It's a reality. No matter what other people tried to convince us or tell us, or what experiences we had that got us confused, if we go back to the real beginning of where we all started, the truth is that it is a gift. Our sexuality, feeling alive, is a gift.
Absolutely. And it's not against the law. There's this like taboo, oh, don't bring up sex at the dinner table, or, people don't really talk about it. I mean, I have a couple of friends that were quite open about and talking about sex. And then a large proportion of my friends, it's like, oh God, it's just not on the table to talk about. And people feel uncomfortable talking about it because many people were brought up, as you were saying before, we don't talk about it, and sex education and all the rest of it. But then as we grow older, it's just something that we do behind closed doors, and it's taboo to talk about. And I think that stops us from really being open and exploring our sexuality and the pleasure we can get from exploring our sexual self and connection with our partners. But it's really interesting how we've all been taught not to talk about it. And this transcribes across different cultures as well, doesn't it? I'm sure you found.
Yes. That's a really good point, because it's like, I don't know if you have it where you live. Here I live in Santa Fe, and we have these, they're called governor lanes, right? And there's these lanes on the road, and it's like on the left side here. And you have to, once you get in this lane, you have to keep in your lane, right? And you can't turn, you can't pass, you got to just stay in this lane. And it's kind of like this. It's like, not only do we not talk about it, but we are running around with other people's rules, and we have to stay in these rules and in these lanes that a lot of times they don't even have to be talked about. We just sort of get them by osmosis. You know what I mean? It's like, we know the rules, right? We have to live by the rules and what it means. What am I talking about? Like, what does it mean to be a good girl? What does it mean to be a bad girl? And what do I through if I'm not in the right lane, and what are people going to say? And so there's a lot of reasons why we keep things and we don't talk about them. But let me tell you, the not talking about stuff is the death of intimacy. I mean, it just crushes being able to be intimate. Because, like, let's face it, when you're by your lovers by your side, you're with your partner, you're with your husband, being able to talk about the most important thing, which is what I want in the moment. Now, if I'm used to staying in the lane and it's not okay to say what I want, even to the one I love. That's where it really, really hurts. Even to the one I love, I can't talk. I want to stay. I want to be a good girl. I want to stay in the right lane, and I don't want to ask for too much, or I don't want to say this hurts, or I don't want to say, oh, could you slow down? There's all kinds of things we get used to. It's a habit. We just keep it inside, and the thing is, we kind of expect our partner, our lover, to kind of, sort of, maybe know what I want. Right. Right. They should know. I mean, if they love me, they would just know somehow. Well, I don't know about you, but most of the partners I've been with, it's like, I got to tell them, right? I got to let them know. And, and that's something we can learn how to do because again, we weren't brought up to talk about things, and a lot of times we just don't know, we don't know how. So, we can really start out by having some conversations like with our friends, and especially with like close girlfriends is a good place to start. Just have not just a bitch session, not just a criticism, not just a judging and complaining session, but like also, talk about what you really long for. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with a girlfriend.
And quite often it's not just the act of sex itself, it's everything that goes with that. It's the physical touch, the build up to it, feeling safe, feeling loved, that communication, feeling relaxed. And quite often it's all the bits around that lead up to the actual intercourse, in inverted commas, that adds to that.
Absolutely. Okay. There's a very, very beautiful way to bring an atmosphere for connection, an atmosphere, an environment that supports your intimacy. And what do I mean by atmosphere? Well, it's your physical environment, your outside. Does it look warm, and does it feel warm? Does there beautiful fabrics and nice things to look at? So it's visually beautiful, but also it's the inner environment that is the most important thing. And what I've noticed is that we all have seasons, and there's some seasons where we're very creative, we're very busy, we're very vibrant. And then there's other seasons where we're slow, where we also may be going through crunchy times, through wobbly times. And so our inner environment is often affects how much time we will allow ourselves to have intimacy. Now, the first key is really to give ourselves permission to ebb and flow through those seasons. It's okay to speed up. Sometimes we're on the fast lane and it's good, feels good. And sometimes we're also in a season, an internal season where we need to slow down. Sometimes we're in a cha-cha, sometimes we need a nap.
And that's so true for my clients, which are mainly like business owners and high achieving women who they're on at business, in business. And then when it comes to their personal lives, like knowing how to come down into that peace and calm and presence. And as obviously as women, we've got other things to contend with whether that's that time of the month, perimenopause, hormone fluctuations, and energy levels. It's all going on for us women. we get the tough end of the deal versus men when it comes to balancing that inner self and creating that inner peace and environment to create those beautiful moments and sensual moments with ourselves and with our partners.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's what we crave, isn't it? Now, intellectually, we know, I mean, I'm sure you know that that's the real mana, that's the real food, like having these intimate connections, moments. It's like food for our soul. We get nourished. But here's the thing, it's like we live on this never ending runway, right? And there's, those walkways in the airport where everyone is speed walking. And if you pause, like somebody's just going to run you right over. And there's no finish line. There's just more hustle. Okay. And so when we stay stuck on that conveyor belt, that assembly line modality inside in our brain, we don't create these natural pauses to create time to have intimacy. I mean, it's just like another to-do thing on the list.
Yeah. And it ends up being like this scheduled date night where it all feels quite contrived and, it's the night where we've got to do it and, have this connection tonight. Oh, wow. What time is it? Right. Time to switch off from work.
And, I agree with you. And the reality is, sometimes we do need to block it off. We really do. And here's the thing. I mean, call it sacred time. All right. Put that first on your calendar. Here is non-negotiable time. Times where the kids don't get to come in. Times when we're not going to pick up the phone. Times when we're not going to do blah, blah, blah. Right. It's my time. And so whether I choose to enjoy that with my partner or self-pleasure or enjoy a beautiful sunset. I mean, whatever it is, it's like pleasure time. Because here's the thing. Okay. We have this weird relationship with even allowing pleasure. Okay. It's not okay. We've been taught it's like, okay, well, I grew up in a family where it's like, if I've got some downtime, it's like, well, that's good time to straighten up the garage. And if I'm not busy, then I'm not productive. And so we got to shift that wiring. It's like, wait a minute. Pleasure time is fuel for our creativity. Pleasure time, intimacy, being touched, feeling alive. That is what gives us the energy. That's what gives us the energy we need, the fuel we need.
Absolutely. And as human beings, we thrive off connection. We thrive off touch. I mean, that releases so much oxytocin. There's obviously studies and science out there that proves how much oxytocin is released. I think you need 12 hugs a day to optimize the oxytocin levels or something like that. And then obviously what goes with, sexual intimacy and orgasms, it releases all those good hormones, serotonin, dopamine. So it's actually healthy and good for us to have intimacy.
Yes. It really is. And it really comes down to some surprising things, like really a real reframe where if we want to expand, okay, what we want to do is we really want to give ourselves a whole new way of looking at our intimacy, looking at our sexuality. And there's really some essential keys to expansion. Number one, okay, just stop resisting rest. Okay. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. Okay. Rest is the fuel for it. Now, I'm just going to tell a little story here. Okay. Because I had this couple that has like the opposite problem of most couples. Most couples complain they don't have enough time or they don't have enough sex or something, right? Well, this couple was the opposite. They actually, they were both on their second. One was on her second, one was on the third marriage. And they actually had a lot of sex and they really, really loved each other. Okay. And they actually came to our retreat wondering, well, what's my edge? How can we already love each other. We're already doing pretty good. And it was remarkable what the breakthrough was. So we were sharing one day, and they were, very connected, very in love and so forth. And the gentleman, just had this amazing breakthrough. He said, Amara, you know what? I'm just going to share this. And he said the whole breakthrough of expansion came when we paused and we stopped. And this was something I showed them how to do. We put our hands on each other's hearts and stopped everything. And we looked into each other's eyes and we said, I love you. I open myself to you. And I taught them to do this and to pause and to stop. And she started crying. She said, yes. I mean, they did all of these things. This was the moment, okay, where they had a really deep, real connection. Sometimes we got to get off the runway, pull over and stop.
It's something that probably wouldn't have happened at home if it wasn't for you, because it can be quite a vulnerable, awkward thing to do, right? Put your hand on each other's hearts but really feel each other and also feel seen by the other partner, seen and heard, and having that moment where there's no distractions and looking into each other's eyes and really being there and open to receiving as well as giving.
Well, that's true. You're right. I mean, it is perhaps a new idea, something to try, but I'm mentioning it because me and my partner, we gave ourselves, and I offer this to your listeners here, we gave ourselves a 90-day challenge. If you want to break and create, you want to break an old pattern, you want to create a new one, right? If you want to create a new pattern, it takes 90 days. Yeah. And so it's 3 moon cycles, 3 rotations of the moon. Okay. So every day we gave ourselves this challenge to do this. I call it the love dance, right? And so you just put your hands on your heart and you look into each other's eyes. You breathe together. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, right? And you start your day like this. It's so hot. It's so hot. All right. Because you want to set your tone for your day. You want to set your nervous system. You want to set your circulation. And most importantly, you want to set your connection. Okay. So before you just fly off into busyness and get into that productivity mode, you feed yourself connection. That's the secret. And you take this little moment. It's so cool. Okay. And what I found was that when we succeeded in the challenge, we did not miss one day. It starts to get really fun. And it makes your lovemaking sweeter. It makes your connection dear and intimate. And so the fuel for your connection is often surprisingly simple. It means slowing down. That's one of the things I specialize in is called somatic sexual practices or somatic sexual wisdom, because that speed up and that going fast, it's not just that men go too fast, really. It's not just that men go too fast, really. It's women too. We've learned to speed up too, right? And so we all need to learn. We all get to learn how cool it is and what we're missing in the slowing down.
Hand on your heart in the morning, look into each other's eyes. I love you and I'm open to you.
Yes, I love you and I open myself to you. And just for your viewers that may be single, because I'm a coach and I work with both singles and couples, right? So my single folks were like, we want to do this too, right? So of course. And so, in fact, my partner was traveling once, so I did it. I tried it out, and so, it's so simple. You just look in the mirror,
Yeah.
You look right in the mirror and you say, I love you. And I open myself to you. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you say it 3 times just to let it sink in.
If you love PS I Love Me and want to dive in deeper, then join the Evolve Woman, my 8-week online coaching program, which will take you on a transformative journey of self-discovery, fulfillment, and to find the joy and love you so deserve. Check out my Instagram, Lynda Williams Coach, to find out more.
I love this because a lot of the other practices on different verticals out there all say to start your day, not looking at your phone, not running around like a blue-ass fly, but to meditate, do breath work. And that you're really bringing all of this together whilst also connecting with your partner. So it's the best way to start your day, connecting with yourself, connecting with your partner, setting yourself up for success for the day. Awesome. So a lot of the women that you coach who have these busy lifestyles at work, and they struggle with that. Well, they're in the masculine energy at work, right? They're in the doing mode, the proactive mode, the strategizing, and then reconnecting with the feminine self of being present and receptive and that kind of softness and surrendering to themselves and into love. What are some of the things, aside to what you just mentioned, what are some of the other things that you help these women kind of really lean into that softness and that sensuality?
Oh my gosh, this is like my favorite subject, because I am actually doing another retreat when I do a women's retreat too. It's called Shakti Queen. And it's all about this, all about what I call the softening. Okay. And in this, one of the first things is, like, we all have busy lives and we all have often drama. And there's also, like, the way I said, there's also a global thing going on where there's just a collective fatigue. And, what I say is accept that there's stuff going on, because I don't know about you, but I don't even know if there's ever been in my time, I don't even know if there's ever been a time in my life where there isn't stuff going on. There's always stuff. And so there's a collective, fatigue going on. And my thing about that is just say, give yourself some space and grace, and accept that you can get exhausted. You can have fatigue. And so one of the things that I do in the practice of softening is to, if you're not near the ocean, if you can't take a walk, like, go and listen to the sound of the ocean. We can usually always take a walk. And that is, I created a practice called Walking in Beauty, where we take this idea of slowness. And it's like if you saw a movie, you're walking in super, super, super slow motion, where it takes you like 5 minutes to just walk across the room, and you way slow down, right? And you only need 3 to 5 minutes to do this. And what it will do is it will cause you to listen in and really assess what's going on. Because here's the thing. When we get so outward focused of do, and all that, what we're not doing is we're not listening in. Okay. And so you can't hear what I call your inner knower if you're overloaded all the time. Okay. Because the messages get lost in the static. The messages, because you can't hear them. So when you slow down and you start breathing and all of that, when you slow down, you get to start to hear these inner messages. Okay. And so when things are what I mentioned, what I call crunchy, it means that something in you is trying to get through. There's a message. You're trying to grow. Something is trying, but there's static in the way when you stay very, very, very busy. Okay. And so the thing is, and why I do retreats and why I really coach, is because you want to ask the deeper questions. Okay. When you slow down, you can ask the deeper questions like, well, where does this go? What do I want to do with these old pieces that are floating around like scar tissues? This stories where you're mad at somebody or you're upset about something. What do I want to do with that? And if you slow down and if you listen in, you're gonna get a message, right? Like the other day, I remind myself of this all the time, just take a really slow walk, okay? And I get a message. And the message I got the other day is keep your promises. And I was like, and I just did an inner scan and I went, oh, is there somebody that I haven't kept my promise with? And in fact, there was this woman, she was a student of mine and she wrote this book and she sent me a little synopsis and it's fantastic. I was really proud. She's my student. And she asked me to write her a review. And I said, yes, I promise. And I got really busy, blah, blah. And it was actually over a month and I said I'd do it. And so there's these little snags of our energy where we promise something and we don't do it. So we're not having integrity with ourselves. And I don't know about you, but it bugs me. It's like, ooh, and I'll have 10 or 15 or 20 times when I go, yeah, I got to do that. Yeah, I should do that. But I don't because I'm busy and I put it away. But then I said, I got this message and it said, keep your promises. And I went, oh, okay. So I sat down and I took 5 minutes and I wrote this review because I was resisting and I was like, oh, what am I going to write? Blah, 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 whatever. I sat down, I wrote it. I have a confession. I wrote down stream of consciousness and then I asked AI to help me, GPT to help me type it up, right? And boom, done. And it was done in like 15 minutes. I was done. I sent it. And I said, I hope it's okay. And she said, oh my God, this is perfect. And the relief I felt from keeping that promise, okay, is huge, okay? Because we all have places where we think we're owed, somebody promised us something and they haven't kept their promise, right? We get upset about that. I know I do, right? Well, the secret recipe, the secret key, and the way it's part of softening, right? It's part of feminine softening is to do the thing where you're hurting. In other words, if I'm hurting about somebody breaking their promise with me, what I got to do to counteract that is what I call is plant a seed of consciousness. Plant the seed of what I want. So I want somebody to keep their promises. Well, maybe I can't get that person to keep their promise to me because whatever, just like me, I was delaying and delaying. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do it, but I had resistance, right? So what I do is maybe I can't have that person keep the promise with me. But what I can do is turn around and ask myself, where in my world, where in my life have I not kept my promises and keep one? And then you get your energy back.
You're right. And it's coming down to your authentic self, isn't it? And what you're saying, like going for a walk in beauty and in nature, it's all about grounding and coming to our senses as well. And you can do that, nature, coming to our senses with what we see, what we feel on our skin, whether it's the sea air or the sun, what we're smelling, whether that's the fragrant smell of frangipane or jasmine or roses, so it's like what we hear. It's all those senses that brings us into the present and grounds us, and then that's when we can start exploring ourselves. And quite often these messages come from the gut. So for me, when I get a little flip in my gut and I feel a bit uneasy, I'm like, oh, where's that come from? What is that telling me? Am I worried about something? Am I stressed about something? Like, oh, what's going on here? And it's having that curiosity as well, isn't it? To that stillness and curiosity to really ask ourselves what's going on here and what little messages is our gut or heart or intelligent intellect telling us. So by having that space and time and that softening to come home to ourselves, can we really start to explore that deeper sense of self and what's going on beneath the surface in our inner environment.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's really beautiful. And that is exactly when we have this in our nervous system and when we have this in our awareness, in our mind, then what comes through our lips is different. What comes what we say. And then when we're speaking in beauty, when we're walking in beauty, then we become softer. And then we are more open to a hug. We're more open to a kiss, a real kiss. I mean, when was the last time you had a real kiss, not like a fast pack? Okay, good. I love you. Yeah. When was the last time? Right. And all you need to do is ask yourself, when was the last time? Okay. And if you ask yourself that, then like the next opportunity is like, well, wait a minute. Like, let's just take a little more care and time here and really hug, really kiss each other and just notice the difference.
It's funny you say that. I mean, with my partner, I'm a very cuddly, intimate person. You know, I love to kiss and everything else. And then he sees me in my business mode on the podcast and everything else. He's like, who are you? But I've learned over the years, you know, in my past life, I was a PR agency owner and I was this on masculine. I had no idea what was going on inside me. I'd come out of a marriage that was sexless. And, you know, I had all this exploration to do of my inner self and what was really going on inside my head brain, heart brain, and gut brain. And, you know, coming back to myself after years of being so on. But now I know how to flow between the polarities of being this on coach and in podcast mode like we are now, and then being in my feminine receptive self and being in that present time and knowing how to kind of get into that moment. And sometimes I have to do a bit of breath work and few deep breaths to shake the day off before, you know, you engage in your personal life. And whether that's just having a lovely meal together or a conversation, it doesn't have to be sexual, but it's just being in that present moment and being able to listen and receive and give in a more conducive way. And when it comes to, you know, we've talked about women in the masculine business mode and coming into that softness. When it comes to people who've kind of been sex shamed, really, don't talk about it with your partner. I mean, they may, as you're saying, they may have a connection and a great sex life, but they just don't talk about it. And then they feel they're not in a safe space to talk about it. They've been told through their upbringing, through their environment, not to talk about it. How can they get rid of that old kind of sex shaming self and come into being a little bit more vulnerable in a safe space?
Well, this is huge. I mean, this is the real question, isn't it? Because some of us may have been quite significantly stunted or interfered with in our evolution, in our connection with life. And so we've had experiences where we were trying to be vulnerable, or we were trying to be open, or trying to just be free and enjoy ourselves, particularly if this happens when we're very young, when we're very innocent, when we're just exploring the world of what it feels like to touch ourselves, for example. I'm just talking about right now with ourselves, and then something interferes with that, and it's like a shock to our system. That's like a little trauma moment, a little shock moment, and we all have them, where we were just innocent and we were open and we just wanted to just feel nice. But something said, no, bad, stop. Okay. So we have these shocks in our system. And that's why what I do in my work is called shamanic, somatic sexual wisdom. Okay. It's where I take it somatically. And just for those that don't know, somatic just means in the body. Okay. So you can't just have the idea in your head. You got to take practices in your body. If you want to change the body, you got to take your body into spaces that feel safe and that feel relaxed. Okay. Those two things. That's when we let pleasure in, when we're safe and when we feel relaxed, not just when we're super excited. Okay. That's good too. Right. And the most scary places are when we're just quiet, right? So one of the things, to answer your question, is that I help people get back to that place of innocence. I go to a time before you were interfered with, before you were interrupted, and help to remember those memories. So you can think back to a time where you're just a child and you were innocent and you were walking up a grassy hill, or you were playing in the snow and you were playful. So one of the ways is to recall those memories and to talk about them with a partner, with your partner, to bring yourself in a state of happiness and joy where there isn't the pressure to have to perform or to do anything. The first way is to talk about these things where it's a little safer and it's not confrontational. And you're not pressured by anyone else, and you're not pressured by yourself. Okay. So very often when I start with someone, I make it, help them make it a safe place to feel pleasure by themselves first. Okay. So I call this self-pleasuring, and I take it into a very sacred ceremony where you're learning to pleasure yourself. And I do this, I give them this practice. It's 3 times a week. Like I said, if you want to change a pattern, you got to repeat something. The only secret to success is repeat something better to replace the old habit, right? So you put this in your body somatically. So you give yourself the message over and over. Pleasure feels nice. Pleasure feels good. But what do you do if you don't feel pleasure, or you don't feel safe, or you don't feel okay? And the secret is this is where having a coach is really important, because there are these deep layer scar tissues, okay, that have collected over time. Very often it's really, really important to have a guide. Someone who's on your side, someone who believes in you, someone who knows the way through because they've just been there themselves and they've helped many, many people go through this. So you got to stay on that pleasure edge. That's what I first started talking about. What's that pleasure edge? Well, it's that space where it's just right past the block. There's a place inside where we go, no, I don't feel like it, or no, not now, or no, I've had enough, or it's too much, or it won't work. Okay. So there's a block to pleasure. There's an edge. And so what we want to do is coax ourselves in and allow ourselves. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay. And so the self-pleasuring is a beautiful, beautiful way to connect the spiritual connection. So while you're pleasuring yourself, you drop the expectations and the rush and the hurry and the have to and all that stuff that's outside, and go inside and just feel yourself. And most important, don't judge yourself. Like I said in the beginning, the pleasure edge is not just these big, fat, wild and juicy, wonderful. Those are great too. But the real edge is what I'm noticing is the sweet spot in the places just past the resistance. And this is what I work with people, because we all have resistances. We all have resistances, right? And so if we want to move past the resistance into the edge of our pleasure, into the edge of our pleasure, okay, that's that sweet spot where it feels nice and it is okay, okay? Those are the sweet spots of intimacy that are the most vulnerable, the most risky. Also, they feel so good because, like, when our partner can stay with us on the edge and be there and just be quiet and be supportive with us and let us have the space to hit the wall and want to feel like stopping, but then just stays there and doesn't just says, yeah, that's okay, or yeah, keep going, I'm here for you. Okay, those are the real spaces where the pleasure.
And there's a lot to unpack here in terms of, I allowing yourself, as you said, and that pleasure edge, it's getting past that and just allowing yourself and not being in a rush, not being in our usual work selves, not being in a rush, and allowing that time. And also not being judged as well, judging yourself and pressuring yourself, and also being with a partner who doesn't judge and feeling you're in a safe space to connect with yourself and explore and get past that pleasure edge. So it's quite a lot of things that you kind of need to not overcome, but just explore.
Yeah. And, you strike me as someone who, I'll be honest with you, like, that really does enjoy pleasure, and you know how to take off that business hat. And by the way, there ain't nothing wrong with that business hat. She's sexy and hot too. And I mean, it's just like what I find is like most of us today, we know we need both, right? We need both. And why not, right? Why not have both the sexy, hot, spicy, juicy, sometimes a little driven, sometimes a little obsessed, okay? And then, as you said earlier, when we want to, we can take off that hat. We can soften. We can let ourselves be nourished by our connections, because that's the real food. That's the real secret. What I teach in Shakti Queen or my retreats. That is the real secret, is that we're actually fed. Because, okay, so how many times, this is a question for you, how many of you times have you really connected with your partner and it was kind of so-so? It wasn't really like, wow, that's deeply, I feel so good. And when was a time when you did feel like, wow, that was really amazing? Notice the difference.
Yeah, and what was going on with the environment, the build-up, what was going on in my internal environment. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And the key is like, we don't need to make ourselves wrong or make our partners wrong. Just notice, it's like, oh, the reason I ask is like, if you can answer that question, like, what makes my connections really, really nourishing? If you can answer that question, I know for me, it's like, was what I'm talking about. It's when you slow down and you really pause inside the pleasure. Just get off the conveyor belt, pull off the road, take a swerve, take a detour, get out of the everything has to be perfect lane.
For high achieving women as well, like busy business women and entrepreneurs who are used to doing everything themselves, they're used to running the show, they're not used to having that much support. And it's getting into that mode of receptivity as well. As you said, allowing yourself to receive, allowing yourself to be nourished when you're just the giver, 50 hours a week, and then it's coming down to oneself and getting into that receptive movement, allowing yourself to receive.
Can I just share one little practice about how I started off doing that? Okay. It's cool to say, I just got to allow myself to be more receptive. Okay. How do we do that? Right. Well, here's a fun little way. I was at one point in my life, I don't do this anymore. I was very strong. I mean, I can open doors and I can kick asses just like any guy. I'm as good as anybody, and I had that energy, right? And so I deliberately, I said, okay, what I'm going to practice today is everywhere I go, I am going to let people, and here's the taboo in quotes word, I am going to ask for people to help this poor, helpless Amara. Right? I'm going to because I never needed help. I never asked anybody. I didn't need it. So guess what? I just pushed it all away, right? So I flipped the switch and I said, okay, I'm going to turn around this. So I asked people, would you open the door for me? And it was so mind-blowing. People, it's particularly men, they opened the doors for me and I allowed them to do it. And I then took a moment and I looked right in their eyes and I said, thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. And I was floored. I mean, it was like, oh, okay. I just did something nice. It was just a little moment. And I did it all day long. I looked for spaces for people, would you get me a coffee, please? Even if I was capable myself. So that's one of the spaces, that's another aspect of softening, okay, and allowing receptivity. If you find yourself up against the wall and feeling stressed, it's a bizarre thing to do, to turn around instead of pushing and doing everything and getting it all right, etc. Okay, is to intend, and I can tell I'm reminding myself. I'm just like, yep, okay. I got to do this too.
It sounds like a lot like I was as well, of allowing. And I think the first time you start asking for help and allowing support and help, it feels a bit awkward at first. It's like, oh, I'm not used to this. This feels a bit icky. And then actually it's a wonderful thing because people want to help and support and connect with you in other ways. And once you start allowing that and asking for help or having that courage to ask for help, because we ain't Superwoman every day of the week, it does soften us and it allows us to connect and be vulnerable. That vulnerability of like, hey, I can't do everything on my own. Like sometimes I struggle and, being that open, vulnerable self and saying, hey, I need a bit of help right now.
Yeah, we get to we get to don the I am a damsel in distress once in a while. And I mean, I don't know why, but Gal Gadot comes to mind. She's just one of my favorite actresses. And she has this ability to flicker, to ebb and flow between like this fierce superwoman. I love that. And then just being like, I really can use some support here. I really need some help here. And then allowing it. And that mixture and that blend will really strengthen your feminine power and potency. I would like to offer a gift to your listeners. And I love to do this when I am on podcast because we never know when someone's going to be listening and really could use some support. So here's what I'd like to do. If you go to my website, amaracharles.com, you'll see a place where you can book a call. And what I'm offering for your watchers and listeners is the chance to do a complimentary one-on-one session with me where you get to talk about anything and we will create a game plan for whatever issue you are facing in your relationship and you'd like to reach a place of deeper intimacy with yourself or with your partner. And we'll hop on the phone. It's for about 45 minutes. And we can make a connection and see if we are a fit to work together.
I am sure you'll get lots of take-ups from that. So we've covered so much today, and I can literally talk to you for hours on these topics. There's so much to explore, and I love what you do and the way that you communicate it with so much love and non-judgment and sincerity. It's really wonderful. Aside to hopping on your website and absolutely taking that call with you, I recommend it. What are a few more other steps, say 3 steps that listeners can take today to really connect with their sensual self?
I'd love to wrap it up. I think one, stop resisting rests. Naps are your friends, right? Walks in the woods or just down the street. Rest, walk, relax is your friend. Number 2, just accept what's going on. I mean, there's going to be stuff, family stuff, world stuff, whatever. Give yourself the grace of allowing that you're going to move through different seasons and take advantage of the season that you're in, okay? Accept and allow. And the most important one, which is what we talked about, listen in. Take the time to ask yourself some of the bigger questions, like, what do I really want? What really is bothering me? Try taking pleasure pauses throughout your day and just breathing and walking.
Well, Amara Charles, it's been an absolute pleasure in all ways, in more ways than one, to have you on the podcast today. So many tips and insights into how, as women, can really reconnect with ourselves more deeply and with our partners, and really uncovering some myths and bringing it back down to, as you said, how we were born, how our innocence was, and really re-engage with our authentic raw self. And I've really enjoyed the chat today. So thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode of PS I Love Me. I hope you've learned some interesting nuggets to weave into your everyday life to feel a little lighter, brighter, and inspired. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more high-achieving women like yourselves to find us. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Lynda Williams Coach, for more daily inspiration and updates.